Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the fastest 15 minutes in food with Dr. David Hughes. I'm Charlie Arnott with the Center for Food Integrity, and we exist to help those in the food system engage with consumers to build trust. We use research and insights to help you understand what's happening in the world of food. Nobody understands that better than Dr. David Hughes, Professor Emeritus at the Imperial College of London, a good friend and CFI colleague. He has decades of experience and continues to travel the world. And happy birthday, David.
Thank you ever so.
Excellent. So we are pre-recorded today, but I can verify that we are not created by artificial intelligence. We are actually here in the flesh having this conversation, but unfortunately we will not be able to answer questions, but we're always happy to respond to email should you like to send one. Topics today are really interesting. As always, we'll be talking about tariffs, self-checkout at supermarkets, and it may not be exactly what you think, and then some land use planning, which is a challenge across the globe, but even more so in the UK, and we'll talk about exactly why. So that first topic we're going to start with, it's the issue that has been in the news quite a bit lately. Potential tariffs with U.S. trading partners. Are they on? Are they off? Are they 10%? Are they 25%? What products are included? What ones are excluded? David, what do you think our trading partners will respond to, and how is the food system and agriculture going to be affected?
Right. Well, actually, our relatively new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, he's just returned from meeting President Trump in DC. And actually, they had a relative love-in. He expected to get a good bashing. But maybe it's relating to on food and drink trade that we're pretty equal, that well, we like your California wines and almonds and pistachios and the like, and you like our Scotch from our whiskey from Scotland. And so there weren't any big arguments, but it's completely different in the EU. There are 27 EU countries, and they're hugely concerned about the impact of US tariffs on food and drink exports because they export a lot to the USA. So what's the concern here, and why do they think they'll take a battering? Well, there's in the European Union, there's a substantial, actually, sorry, in the US, there's you like food from the EU. You know, you like the wines and you like the nice cheeses and some of the fine meats. Whereas on the US end, that in the EU are a little bit snooty, to be frank, about stuff from the US, and so you can see why there might be an imbalance. And so EU consumers prefer their own products. In fact, they can be, as I said, snooty. And the EU has stringent regulations for pesticides, hormone use, GMOs, those so-called phytosanitary items. And you lot, not unreasonably sometimes, consider it that that's just a trade barrier. And also, the EU uses more geographic indications on specific foods. You know, so for example, champagne must come from Champagne, the Champagne region of France. Parmigiano Reggiano, a specific area in Italy. Parma ham, the same. And I think this looks like there could be a serious food fight, if you will, Charlie, between the US and the EU, and the EU knows that, and they don't like it.
All right, so we're going to move into our second topic. I think this one is just fascinating, and I'm going to share a bad joke that I shared with David a couple of days ago. Food inflation is off the charts on everyone's mind. Egg prices are a topic of discussion. We're thinking about importing them from Ukraine of all places, and the Amish Powerball is up to 4 dozen eggs. So that's my bad joke for the day. So no surprise, inflation, food prices, everybody's talking about it. And really a real focus on eggs right now. And it appears like the US might be importing eggs from Ukraine of all places. But inflation is also impacting consumer behavior in a very interesting way that's not so positive as it relates to self-checkout. I think this is fascinating. So David, give us the details.
Right. Well, we were a bit late into self-checkout. It's 30 years ago we first got it. And actually, you were 10 years faster. You often are. It was Kroger in Atlanta in 1986. But just like you guys, 75% of US consumers prefer self-checkout. We're not at that level, but it is over 55% in the UK prefer it. But a good solid 30% prefer to talk to traditional staff. Often as not, that's older people. They may be going to the supermarket for social They take the bus in our case and pop to the supermarket and like to chat to people while they're there. We like self-checkout though, just like you guys, because it's convenient and it can be fast. And what's more, you'd think that supermarkets would love it, and they do because it's less staff for them and they use less space. So it's a double win, wouldn't you think? But the interesting thing, Charlie, this was a big survey done in the UK and on really self-checkout, but they also asked the question, what about shrinkage and shoplifting, for goodness sake? And so they actually asked the individuals, are you always honest? And believe it or not, 37% said occasionally they fail to scan an item. And a full 33% said yes, they often has not just maybe put in a lower value item than the one they actually took off the shelf. So, for example, they took organic off and maybe just put conventional in. And who does this? Who's most likely to do it? Well, it didn't surprise me. It's rather disappointing from a gender point of view, but actually men are more likely to do it, and
Hmm.
particularly those who are under 35. And when asked, why on earth do you do this? They were forthright too. They said, well, short of money right now, it's a difficult times. But also, more darkly, actually, they said, actually, we don't think we're likely to get caught. And even worse, some saying we're not the sort that staff are profiling. So why couldn't I get away with it? And some of them viewed it as a sort of like a loyalty card benefit. They thought, the
Hmm.
supermarkets are big, they make lots of money. Why on earth can't we just have a little bonus every now and again? Intriguingly, the surveys went to the criminologist and said, what's all this about? And her view was that people tend to use techniques, and her phrase was of neutralization. And she made the example, said, like minor motor offenses, say speeding, then taking a little bit now and again from a sewer is not really a crime. Well, it is, of course. It is a crime. And what's more, supermarkets have made the matter worse in some respects, in that certainly in the UK, they've cut back on security guards. And what's more, if they have them and call the police, because they have to call the police if you want to make a charge, then the police are often unlikely to turn up. They just won't respond. And then if they do, they tend to be dismissive and say, well, look, it's only 20 or 30. Let's give them a good reprimand and then tell them not to do it again. So, it's not a lovely picture, to be frank.
Yeah, we see it here in the US as well in terms of shrink, but it's fascinating the stores that have decided to stay with self-checkout versus those that have eliminated it. So there's a brand my wife and I shop out very frequently. And in one neighborhood, they still use self-checkout. In another neighborhood, they've eliminated it. But what's interesting, it's the more affluent neighborhood where they've eliminated it. So it's
Yes,
just
yes.
really, really interesting to see how these things continue to play out. I'm sure the calculation is labor savings versus shrink, right? And how do I
Yeah. Oh,
decide how I'm going to
yes. Yeah.
rationalize that as I go forward? So, David, we're moving to our last topic of the day, and we know historically that regulations in the UK and the EU are more restrictive than in the US. We talked about that earlier in terms of kind of that precautionary principle approach that we don't have in North America. But geography also plays a role, particularly as it relates to land use. So it's an issue that is of concern in North America, particularly for agriculture. But give us the UK perspective on that.
Right, yeah, and you're right. We are nanny-statish, mind you. They are in the EU too, but we're only a small island, or several islands, as it happens. And if you take England, part of the UK, England is exactly the same size as the state of Louisiana, but
Hmm.
it's got 13 times the population. And our new Labour government for England is saying we want to produce more food. We're only 60% self-sufficient. It's unstable around the world. We need to produce more. That's one. Two, they want more houses. We're 1.5 million houses short, and the Labour government saying we're going to build or help build 20 new towns. And then thirdly, the Labour government wants to be a global green energy superpower using land-based as well as sea-based solar and wind power. And so The issue for us is we've only got so much land. And I like the idea. I'm not nannyish myself, but the Labour government said, let's have a national conversation on land use to get the views of those who are producing food, who are making energy, who are building homes, who also regulate it, because we can do that at the city level and say, how can we do this best? Because the worry is that you can just put some super green energy with solar power on first class arable land, and then you lose food production.
Yep.
So yes, we're just short, and I think this is just commonsensical. We need more talk about this, and we need to get on with it because I think it is an unstable world, frankly.
It is. And of course, we have the challenge of the Make America Healthy Again initiative in the United States, which presents an entirely new set of challenges that we'll have to work our way through. Final tidbits for this month, David.
Yeah, I've got two. If I can do two quickly. If I look back last year, private label did extraordinarily well in the UK. We're over 50% of total grocery sales are private label anyway. You're only about 20%. I know it's grown in the US, but what I've seen in the UK is that hard discounters moved, added into their offer premium private label, and it did brilliantly. And so over Christmas in particular, it actually did much, much better than the traditional supermarkets. So we're seeing this growth from a very high level anyway. But if you allow me just a last little tidbit, because it's sort of North American-ish. I mean, right at the moment, lamb prices in the UK are record highs, and you're not a lamb consumer, or I mean nationally. Actually, we consume 10 times more per person
Oh, wow.
than you do in lamb. I mean, frankly, Charlie, and tongue in cheek, the coyotes eat more lamb than you guys do in the US, but that's by the by. But with the cost of living crisis and all, remember that sheep are produced, of course, in rural areas, and particularly in the UK, it's in high mountainous areas, our big moors, Dartmoor, which is in the southwest of England. And what's become a big deal is the Wild West feel to this, rustling. Rustling is just got widespread and growing. As I said, sheep are on our moorlands. They roam free, which is great for the sheep, but it's also great for those who wish to steal them. And what's more, it's difficult to catch those who are stealing sheep. And then back to what I was mentioning with the supermarkets and theft in the supermarkets, the police are saying, look, we're too busy to cover off this. But it's become a real problem for some farmers. That's their living, and then they turn up on their hill and find that there are 150 sheep less than there were. No, it's a big deal, and it's not a
Yeah,
pretty sight.
that's fascinating. And the economics just are really interesting to follow, whether it's the self-checkout or the sheep rustling. Really interesting perspective, as always, David. We're so grateful for that. Don't forget to join us on April 3rd. That will be our April edition, and we will be live once again for the fastest 15 minutes in food. So, David, again, happy birthday, safe travels, and we will see you in April.
Thank you very much, Charlie, and look forward to April.